My name is Drew Waldron, and I am on with motorist and entrepreneur Torsten Gross. Torsten, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Now, Torsten, you and I have worked together multiple times before. I'm familiar with your story, but how do you typically introduce yourself to audiences that are unfamiliar with your story?
I would call myself multi-hyphenate. The obvious one is C6 quadriplegic that's in a wheelchair. But then I have a very hard time filling in after that because the multi-hyphenate is I race cars, I have a charity, I sell hand controls, I'm an ex-marketing guy that is a fractional chief marketing officer right now. I would probably have to look at a list and see all the things that I do from a part-time, full-time.
When you're balancing so many hats, what made you first want to get into speaking and share your story?
To me, we all have that thing that we believe holds us back. And society has taught us that people in wheelchairs, we get to see them and there's a lot of, let's call it pity behind them. And what I wanted to be able to talk to people about is saying, well, everybody's got a wheelchair. Whether you've got depression, whether you've got PTSD, whether you had a bad childhood, whatever it may be, everyone's got that thing that holds them back. So while I might have something that's visibly different, we all have something that we can overcome. But for me, I think that our biggest weakness, or what we perceive as our biggest weakness, is also our biggest superpower. And that's what I want to talk to people about and how help them find their superpower.
That's incredible. And when you're giving these talks to, let's say, a corporate audience, what do you find are some of the reactions that you've been receiving?
I mean, other than smoke machines going off and t-shirt guns coming out and standing applause, other than that, I think people understand very quickly that while my chair is something that they can't relate to, they can relate to my idea of success and more so failure. And I like to talk about my resume as my failure resume instead of my success resume, because everyone can see the successes. But more people have the failures behind them, and we as society don't give permission to fail. Failure is seen as a weakness. Failure is seen as bad. I actually think failure is fantastic. And without failure, you can't grow. So I try and help people find that failure, but then that's the thing that they relate to, because I've never met anyone who hasn't failed before.
Despite having such a great failure resume, your success resume is far more impressive. And one of my favorite points is that you are the founder of the Just Hands organization. Now, what is the mission of that organization?
Our job is to get people into motorsports who use hand controls to drive. So people in chairs to drive or do adaptive mountain biking.
For anyone who might be unfamiliar with hand controls for cars, what does that entail for someone that might not have the full use of their body?
Yeah, so the first response I'll say is I turn for gas and I push for brake, and that's how I drive with my right arm and I steer with my left. But there's a bigger response in the question that you have, and that is freedom, and that is equality. And what I mean by equality is actually that there's no other sport on this planet that makes somebody who's in a wheelchair equal to able-bodied people, unless you're Irish and you believe that darts is a sport. I consider it drinking adjacent, not really a sport, but we can argue about that another time. If you don't consider darts as a sport, then motorsports is the only thing that makes this equal, because the car doesn't care that I'm in a chair and the people on track don't know that I'm in a chair. The liberation of that and the feeling of that is amazing, and that's something I had to share with people through Just Hands.
I won't get into the darts debate, but clearly you are very, very passionate about motorsports. What do you think drew you to it in the first place? Why are you so passionate about this sport?
Other than the fact that it makes me equal to able-bodied people, it's not something I ever knew I could do. I'm not somebody who turned a wrench when they were younger. I got into the sport in my early 40s. Only 3 or 4 years ago. Things have taken off very quickly. I guess pun intended, taken off very quickly. And I love that. And it is something that I can share with others and be part of a bigger community, and not just a small community, meaning the disabled community as my competitors, but anybody. And there's something very liberating about that. The second part is driving in and of itself is incredibly creative. I think if you haven't gotten into it, you look at it as 4 wheels and a steering wheel. It's not. Every car is fundamentally different and how you set it up, and it's got to be personal. That to me is an endeavor that will never end. I can't ever succeed because there's always going to be something more.
And your involvement with motorsports, it has brought the production of a documentary your way. And I know that it's still in development. There's some things that still can't be discussed about it, but what can you tell us about the upcoming documentary featuring you?
A very large streaming service followed me around for a year documenting my journey into racing. They documented the good and, let me tell you, the very, very bad that happened on track. which is what it was supposed to do, right? It was all about me and getting into motorsports. It comes out in the middle of April. And let me just say, it is a streaming service that almost every person in this country has.
We'll keep it at that. We'll keep it vague.
I'll
Uh,
leave it at that.
Perfect. I'd love to throw you a bit of a curveball question. One of the most fascinating points in your biography is the fact that you are the world's only quadriplegic scuba rescue diver. How did that come about? What can you tell us about that?
So while driving is the only thing that makes us equal to able-bodied people, scuba diving is something that makes us feel like an able-bodied person. It's the only sport where I don't have my chair under me. I don't see it. You are floating, right? So you really are back to able-bodied life, if you will. So we started scuba diving, and that was a lot of fun. But the problem was at that time, I needed something called the HSA certification buddy. Handicap Scuba Association, meaning somebody that could dive with somebody in a wheelchair. Well, I didn't want to do that because I didn't want all my friends to have to get HSA certified. That sounded silly. So I found a loophole. And that loophole was become a rescue diver because they'll only ask you for that card. I went to 6 different dive shops and they all said no. And I went to the 7th one and I put a large stack of money on the table. And I said that there are 2 narratives that you could have right now. One is that you stole a guy in a wheelchair's money. The second one is that you allowed a guy in a wheelchair to try to become a rescue diver and you failed him. Which one's it going to be? And the guy goes, all right, you can give it a shot. I'm going to have to fail you. You're not going to be able to pass it. By you saying it in the up front, you gave it away. I just became, or not just, I became a rescue diver because all I asked was judge me on the outcome, not how I do something. And then I became the world's only quadriplegic rescue diver.
That is incredible, and it only took 7 attempts. That is
I,
such a story.
Hey, look, no to me is just a request for more information. So if somebody says no to me, I realize I haven't sold them the right way. I haven't told them enough information. So let me keep going.
Torsten, I want to conclude this interview by asking you something we ask a majority of the people we interview on this show. What advice do you have for young people?
Know that it's going to be okay. That all the no's actually equal to a yes. You just don't know it yet. That's it. I think we're taught so much that if you don't land that first job or your dream job, or if you don't do exactly what you had dreamed of to do, that equals failure. And as somebody who is multi-hyphenate, who has done a lot of things, and each time I do something, I kind of go, well, this is dumb. Why would I start doing this? I'm not going to be able to do it. And I fail quite a bit in order to achieve success. I wouldn't keep going if I chose failure as an answer. So it'll all work out one way or another.
It'll all work out. Just keep going. Torsten, thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure to interview you. That is going to conclude our conversation with Torsten Gross. Torsten, thank you again.
Thank you.